My name is Claire Mackenzie. I'm 31 years old. 5 years ago, my husband died on the Deerfoot Trail when a transport truck jackknifed on black ice, and our son was born 11 weeks early in the same hospital where they told me Ryan didn't make it. I needed $28,000 in 5 days, or they were transferring Owen to BC Children's Hospital in Vancouver without me because I couldn't afford to follow him. I called my parents 42 times over 3 days. My brother called me once. He said the cruise was non-refundable, and I needed to be realistic. They sailed to Alaska. I never spoke to them again, until the spring of 2025, when my brother showed up at my door in Inglewood with a manila envelope and a look on his face I recognized immediately. It was the same look he had in 2020, when he told me to be realistic. He had documents. He had numbers. He had one sentence that made the floor feel like it dropped out from under me, and what I found out next would cost him everything he thought was already his. It was a Tuesday morning in January. Ryan always left early for work. He taught grade 7 science at a school in Airdrie, and the commute up Deerfoot in winter could turn a 40-minute drive into 2 hours. I was 26 weeks pregnant. I'd felt the baby move the night before, these small rolling kicks that made me put Ryan's hand on my stomach at midnight and watch him grin in the dark. He'd kissed my forehead and said, 11 more weeks. I remember that exactly. 11 more weeks. He kissed me goodbye before 6. I fell back asleep. My phone rang at 7:14. Unknown number, Calgary area code. The woman on the line said she was calling from Foothills Medical Center. She asked if I was the wife of Ryan Mackenzie. She asked me to come in right away. Her voice had that specific careful flatness that I now know means the worst has already happened, and they are simply delivering the information. I don't remember the drive. I remember leaving the house in mismatched socks. I remember the parking garage at the hospital being completely full and circling 3 times. I remember a security guard pointing me toward emergency. I don't remember anything else, until a doctor in green scrubs was standing in front of me in a small family room with beige walls and a box of Kleenex on the table. He sat down. That was how I knew. Doctors stand when there's still something to hope for. He explained that the transport truck had crossed the center lane on the ice. Ryan's SUV took the impact on the driver's side. The trauma team had worked on him for 40 minutes. The injuries were unsurvivable. He was 29 years old. I opened my mouth to say something, and my body answered instead. A pain so sharp it took my breath clean away. A nurse was beside me immediately. Then another. Someone said the word contractions, and someone else said 26 weeks, and I was in a wheelchair, and people were running beside me, and I remember thinking this cannot be the same day. This cannot be happening in the same hour. Owen James Mackenzie was born at 11:42 that morning, by emergency C-section. He weighed 1 pound, 14 ounces. He was 73 days early. He didn't cry. They showed me a photograph before I went under a tiny creature covered in wires and tubes, and a ventilator mask that covered most of his face. He looked like someone had tried to build a person, and hadn't finished yet. I woke up in the afternoon. A neonatologist named Dr. Osei sat beside my bed. He explained that Owen was in the NICU on level 5 of the hospital. He was on a ventilator. His lungs had not developed enough to breathe on their own. They were monitoring for brain bleeds, for sepsis, for necrotizing enterocolitis. Babies born at 26 weeks had good survival rates at Foothills, he said. But Owen had a heart abnormality, a significant patent ductus arteriosus that would require intervention within the week. Foothills could manage it initially, but if Owen didn't respond to medication, he would need surgical repair. And that surgery was only available at BC Children's Hospital in Vancouver. Dr. Osei said they would know more within 48 to 72 hours. That same afternoon, a woman named Janet from the Family Support Office came to my room. She was kind. She sat down and spoke gently. She explained that while Alberta Healthcare covered Owen's NICU care at Foothills, a transfer to BC Children's Hospital fell under a different framework. My health coverage wouldn't extend to accommodation in Vancouver. If Owen needed to be there for 6 to 8 weeks, which was likely, I would need to find my own housing near the hospital. That meant flights, rent, living expenses while I had no income. I'd been on a part-time contract with an engineering firm, and my mat leave had not yet started. Ryan's income from the school board would continue through February under bereavement provisions, but after that there was the mortgage, $1,200 a month in student debt repayment, Ryan's truck payments. She pushed a printed sheet across the coffee table toward me. A rough estimate. Accommodation near BC Children's for 2 months alone was $10,000 to $14,000. With travel, food, and the gap in coverage for Owen's supplementary respiratory therapy, not included in the standard provincial transfer protocol, she estimated I would need approximately $25,000 to $30,000 to manage. She said that BC Children's had a Ronald McDonald House with a waitlist. She said there were grants I could apply for. She said the process took between 4 and 12 weeks. I had 5 days before Owen's cardiac team would make the call on transfer. That evening, they brought me in a wheelchair to the NICU. Owen was in an incubator in the corner. He was so small, I could have held him in one palm. The ventilator hissed and clicked. His oxygen monitor beeped every few seconds. A nurse named Priya showed me where I could touch him through the porthole. Just one finger, gently, on the back of his hand. He curled his fingers around mine. I know it's a reflex. I know that's what newborns do. But I sat there with my dead husband's son holding my finger, and I made a decision, sitting in that plastic chair, that I was going to do whatever it took. I started a GoFundMe that night from my hospital bed. I wrote it 3 times before I got the words right. I raised $4,210 from 68 people in the first 24 hours. Most of them were Ryan's colleagues, parents from his school, a few people from our neighborhood in Inglewood I barely knew. One anonymous donor gave $500. I never found out who. I still needed $28,000. I had 4 days. I scrolled to my mother's number in my contacts. We weren't close, exactly not since I'd moved to Calgary for university and stayed while they retired to Kelowna. We spoke on Sundays, sometimes. I hadn't called on a Tuesday in years. I pressed call. She picked up on the second ring. Claire? Is everything okay? I told her. I told her everything. Ryan was gone. Owen was in the NICU. He might need to be transferred to Vancouver. I needed help. I need a bridge loan, I said. $25,000. Maybe 28. I'll sign whatever you need. As soon as the life insurance processes, I'll pay it back in full. Ryan had a $220,000 policy through the school board. It would take 6 to 8 weeks to pay out. There was a long pause. Oh, sweetheart, she said. That's just so much money. I know it is. But Owen might not survive the transfer wait time without this, and I can't be in Vancouver without somewhere to stay. Let me talk to your father. Her voice had gone careful and distant, the way it did when she didn't want to say no directly. We'll call you tomorrow. The call lasted 8 minutes. She didn't say she loved me before she hung up. I only noticed because I sat there afterward thinking about it. Over the next 3 days, I called my parents 42 times. I kept a log in the Notes app on my phone. I don't entirely know why. Maybe because I felt like I was losing my mind, and having a record of something, anything, felt like an anchor. 23 calls went to voicemail. 14 were declined. 5 my mother answered, each time telling me she was still talking to my father, still working it out, still hoping to find a solution. On the second day, my brother Daniel called. We hadn't spoken properly since Christmas. He was 7 years older than me, lived in Vancouver, worked in commercial real estate. He'd always been the stable one, the responsible one, the one my parents held up quietly as the example of how things should be done. I heard about Ryan, he said. I'm so sorry, Claire. I genuinely am. Thank you, but I need help. I need to ask you to talk to Mom and Dad. I already did. He paused. Look, I'm going to be straight with you, because I think that's more useful right now than what you want to hear. They have the money. You know that. But it's not liquid. It's in their retirement accounts, their GICs. Pulling that out early costs them penalties. And Claire, there's something else. He told me about the cruise. They'd booked it 7 months ago, an Alaskan cruise out of Vancouver, sailing in 11 days. The deposit was $8,000, non-refundable. The full package was $16,000, and cancellation at this point forfeited everything. They'd been planning it since before my father's knee replacement. It was supposed to be the trip they'd always talked about. I understand they're going on a cruise, I said. My son is on a ventilator. I know. But pulling $28,000 in a week isn't something they can just do, Claire. It's not that simple. Where are you right now? I asked. I could hear traffic, a coffee machine. I'm at a client meeting. What does that? You're in Vancouver. Owen might be transferred to Vancouver. And you're telling me on a phone call that your parents can't help, and you can't help, and I should just what? Accept it? I'm saying be realistic about what people can actually do. Call Ryan's parents. Call the hospital social worker. There are programs for this. He hung up. I called my parents 11 more times that afternoon. 11 times declined within 2 rings. That night my mother texted me. Claire, we know you're struggling. We're trying to figure out a path forward. Please try to get some rest. You need your strength. I was sitting in the NICU family room. Owen's oxygen had dropped twice that hour. The nurse had taken me outside the room while they stabilized him. I read my mother's text in the hallway with the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, and I felt something inside me go absolutely still. The next morning was day 4. Owen's cardiologist came to my room at 8. The medication had not closed the PDA. He would need surgical intervention. BC Children's had a spot. They wanted to transfer him within 48 hours. I called my parents one last time. My father answered. It was the first time he'd picked up in 3 days. Claire. His voice was measured, the way it always was. He'd spent 35 years as a financial advisor. He had a voice built for delivering unwelcome information calmly. Dad. I couldn't make myself say anything else for a moment. Please. We've been talking about this for 3 days, he said. Here's where we've landed. We can send you $2,000 when we get back from the cruise. That's what we can do responsibly, without disrupting our retirement savings in a way that affects us long term. I could hear my mother in the background. A zipper. Then another. Are you packing right now? We leave in 8 days. Dad. Owen is being transferred to BC Children's tomorrow. He needs heart surgery. I don't have anywhere to stay. I can't follow my son to Vancouver, and I don't. I literally cannot afford to be there. The Ronald McDonald House has a 12-week wait list. Silence. The life insurance will come through, he said. You're going to be fine. You're 29 years old. You'll rebuild. Your mother and I worked our whole lives for this retirement. We've given up a lot. This is our time. I listened to my mother's suitcase zipper close in the background. You're choosing a cruise over your grandson's surgery, I said. We're not choosing anything. We're acknowledging reality. We can't solve this for you. He hung up. I sat there with the phone in my lap and looked at the window. Gray January sky over Calgary. Ice on the river. I called Ryan's parents in Fredericton. His mother, Diane, cried so hard she couldn't speak for 2 minutes. They were retired, not wealthy. She transferred me $3,300, everything in their checking account within the hour, and apologized for it not being more. His father got on the line and told me he was proud of me and that I was going to get through this. I cried in a way I hadn't let myself cry since the morning Ryan died. I called my bank. I was denied for an emergency personal loan. I had no current employment income, and Ryan's income wasn't in my name. I sold Ryan's truck back to the dealership for net $6,000 after the outstanding loan balance. I cashed out my own RRSP $12,400 minus 30% withholding tax. I took the penalty. I asked my closest friend, Keiko, who had known me since university, and she drove to my house and handed me a personal check for $4,000 and told me she didn't want it back. I reached out to the Pediatric Oncology Group of Ontario, by mistake wrong organization, and found the right one, the Children's Heart Network, which had an emergency assistance fund. They approved $3,000 in 48 hours. Total, $29,700. I booked a flight to Vancouver for the same day as Owen's air ambulance transfer. I found a sublet in Kitsilano through a Facebook group for NICU parents. $800 a week. I never sent my parents an email. I didn't write a letter. I didn't send a message. I deleted their numbers from my phone on the day Owen's transfer was confirmed. My brother, too. What I did keep was everything else. The call log. The voicemails. Every declined call. The text about getting rest. The discharge summary from the hospital that listed both my parents as emergency contacts and the amendment I filed the following week, removing their names and replacing them with Diane's number in Fredericton. Owen's surgery at BC Children's lasted 6 hours. I sat in a waiting room in Vancouver, 3,000 kilometers from where my parents were boarding a cruise ship, and I held Keiko's hand through a video call and waited. His surgeon came out and told me Owen had done beautifully, that he was small and fierce, and he was going to be okay. I went into the bathroom and sat on the floor and let myself fall apart completely, and then I washed my face and went to see my son. We stayed in Vancouver for 9 weeks. Owen came home to Calgary in April, 4.5 months after he was born, weighing 6 pounds, 2 ounces. He still needed supplemental oxygen. He needed occupational therapy twice a week, speech therapy beginning at 18 months, cardiology follow-ups every 3 months for the first 2 years. His development was delayed by about 4 months across the board. He was small. He was stubborn. He was brilliant and suspicious, and the funniest person I had ever known. Ryan's life insurance paid out in March. $222,000. I sat at my kitchen table with the letter and thought about all the ways Ryan would have known what to do with it. I thought about that for a long time. I bought a small house in Inglewood, Ryan, and I had loved that neighborhood. 2 bedrooms, a backyard with a big spruce tree. $760,000, which in Calgary in 2020 was about what you'd expect for something livable. I put down $140,000, took a mortgage for the rest. I got a full-time position at an engineering firm downtown. I started over. I did not Google my parents. I did not check their Facebook. I asked Diane once, carefully, if she knew anything, and she said she heard through someone that they'd moved from Kelowna to the Okanagan somewhere quieter. I said okay, and we didn't bring it up again. Owen started JK at a school 3 blocks from our house. He had 2 best friends. He could write his name. He was obsessed with dinosaurs in the specific, encyclopedic way that 4-year-olds get obsessed with things. He had a tiny scar on his chest that he called his rocket mark. He didn't know what it was from. He didn't know about the NICU or the surgery or the 9 weeks in Vancouver. He didn't know about his father, not really, except through photographs and the stories I told him. Every year, on Ryan's birthday, March 15th, I took Owen to the reservoir in Fish Creek Park where Ryan used to run on Sunday mornings. We brought the world's worst homemade sandwiches, which was a tradition I had invented and now could not escape. Owen was 4, then almost 5. He asked me once why we didn't have grandparents like his friend Marcus did, grandparents who came for Christmas and brought things in bags. You have Grandma Diane and Grandpa Ken in Fredericton, I said. They love you so much. He thought about this. What about your ones? I paused. I don't have mine anymore, bud. Did they die? No. It's complicated. He looked at me with Ryan's eyes. Okay, he said, and went back to his sandwich. He trusted me the way only 4-year-olds trust their mothers, completely and without requiring more. I was at work on a Tuesday afternoon in March 2025 when I got the call from Daniel. I hadn't heard his voice in almost 5 years. I recognized it anyway, immediately. The way you recognize something you've been half expecting without admitting it. Claire. He sounded different. Older, I suppose, but also something else. Don't hang up. I have some news. I waited. Mom and Dad were in an accident on the Coquihalla last month. Black ice. There it was. The same road conditions that took Ryan. The same way things end. They didn't survive, Daniel said. It was instant. The other driver was okay. I looked at my computer screen. A project plan, color-coded, completely meaningless. Claire, are you there? Why are you calling me? Because you're still their daughter. And there's an estate. I said I didn't want anything from them. It's not that straightforward. I need to come see you. There are things you need to know that I can't explain over the phone. I should have said no. I know that. But there was something in his voice. Not grief, exactly, or not only grief that told me this was not a courtesy call. There was something he needed from me. I said Saturday morning. My house. 10 o'clock. He said he'd be there. He arrived on time, which surprised me. He looked like our father around the eyes now, which surprised me more, and I liked less. He was wearing a Patagonia jacket, expensive, the kind of thing that signaled you'd made it without trying to look like you were signaling it. He stood on my porch and looked at the spruce tree in the front yard and said it was a nice house. I said come in and didn't offer him coffee. He put a folder on my kitchen table. He sat down across from me. The estate, he said, was valued at just over $1.3 million. The house in Summerland in the Okanagan was worth $800,000. RRSPs and TFSAs totaling $400,000. A vehicle, savings, some investments. Under BC intestate succession law, absent a valid will, the estate would split equally between surviving children. My share would be approximately $650,000. I looked at the number on the paper he pushed across the table. $650,000. I told him I didn't want it. He looked at me for a moment. Then he opened the folder to a different page. There was a will. Last will and testament, signed October 2020. Notarized. Witnessed. I read it carefully. Article 3 stated that the entire estate was to pass to their son, Daniel Robert Whitfield, and that their daughter, Claire Ann Mackenzie, was excluded on the grounds of having voluntarily severed the family relationship and refused all subsequent attempts at reconciliation. There were no attempts, I said. I know. Then why are you showing me this? If this exists, you inherit everything. He was quiet for a moment. He closed the folder, opened it again to a different section. He slid a piece of paper across. It was a life insurance policy. Sun Life of Canada. Policy number. Death benefit, $400,000. Insured, my father. Beneficiary, Daniel Robert Whitfield, 100%. Policy effective date, the 14th of February 2020. Valentine's Day, 2020. 6 weeks after Owen's surgery. 4 weeks after Ryan's insurance paid out. Is this a coincidence? I said. That this policy was opened 6 weeks after Owen's surgery and 4 weeks after Ryan's insurance came through? Daniel didn't answer. I flipped back to the application notes. There was a section under the purpose of coverage. It read, Estate planning for financially responsible heir. Daughter estranged due to emotional instability and inability to manage personal relationships. Emotional instability, I said. Claire. I called them 42 times in 3 days because their grandson was being airlifted to Vancouver for heart surgery. I documented every single call. He didn't say anything. You already received the insurance payout, I said. It wasn't really a question. $412,000. With interest. I sat back in my chair. Owen was at school. The house was very quiet. I could hear the furnace running. So let me understand what you're proposing, I said. You have $400,000 from the life insurance. You want me to sign a waiver, giving up my legal claim to the $650,000 from the estate. You keep everything. I get nothing. And in exchange, you avoid a lengthy, expensive court process that could take 2 to 3 years and cost you $100,000 in legal fees. He reached into the folder and produced another document. A waiver, a notary seal already in place, a pen beside it, and you avoid making this public. Dad had a lot of friends in the financial community. I have a lot of clients. If this goes to court, a lot of things become part of the public record. Things about why you cut off your family. Things that might look different from another angle. I looked at the waiver. I looked at my brother. Are you threatening me? I'm being realistic. The way I should have been in 2020. He said that last part quietly, and I almost believed he meant it. I need time to think, I said. He nodded. Told me he needed an answer within 2 weeks, that the estate couldn't stay in probate indefinitely. He left the folder on my table and showed himself out. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the dark and listened to Owen breathe through the baby monitor. I still kept on from habit even though he was 4.5, and I thought about the waiver. I thought about $650,000. I made the same list I told myself I wouldn't make. Owen's RDSP, maxed. His therapy costs through to age 10, covered. The mortgage, cleared. Ryan's student loans, finally gone. Money set aside for whatever Owen needed that no provincial program would cover, because I knew better than most that the gaps were real and wide and expensive. I tore up the list. Figuratively. I didn't actually make it on paper, but I tore it up in my head and lay there in the dark. 3 days later, I found a probate and estate litigation lawyer named Rosamond Park at a firm downtown. She gave me a free 30-minute consultation. I told her everything. She listened without writing anything down until I was finished. Then she picked up her pen. The will is legally valid on its face, she said. But you can challenge it on 2 grounds. First, undue influence, specifically your brother's documented communications, encouraging your parents to cut you out, which you said you have in writing. Second, the exclusion clause relies on a characterization of you as the party who severed the relationship, which is factually disputed, and which you have documented evidence to contradict. 42 call logs, voicemails, a hospital file that lists your parents as emergency contacts up to the point you removed them. All of that establishes that you did not abandon them. They chose not to respond. And the insurance policy? That's a separate matter. The application lists your estrangement as a reason your father considered his estate planning. But if the characterization of the estrangement was false or materially misleading, if he told Sun Life there was a mutual falling out, when in fact he and your mother failed to respond to a family emergency, you may have grounds to flag that to the insurer as a misrepresentation issue. I'll be honest, it's a harder argument. But it's not nothing. What are my odds on the will contest? She considered this. 60-40 in your favor. Maybe 65. The documented calls are strong. The timeline of the will signed in October 2020, 9 months after Owen's surgery, is suggestive. It'll be expensive and it'll take time. 2 years, possibly 3. But you have a real case. I called Daniel. Same place, I said. Your timeline works for me. He arrived at my door on a Saturday morning with the folder and a notary, and an air of someone who considered this already resolved. He sat across from me at the same kitchen table. So, he said, what's your answer? I picked up the waiver. I read it one more time, from top to bottom. I thought about what Rosamond had said. I thought about Owen. I thought about Ryan. I thought about a Tuesday morning in January, and a phone ringing in the dark and 42 unanswered calls, and a photo of my parents in Okanagan wine country that I'd found on Facebook 2 years after they'd died, smiling at some retirement garden party, looking completely fine. I put the waiver back down on the table, unsigned. I'm contesting the will, I said. His face changed. Claire, don't do this. This will cost you. I have a lawyer. I have the call logs. I have the voicemails. I have the hospital file with your parents' names crossed out in my handwriting. I slid the waiver back across the table to him. I have every text message, including the one from my mother telling me to get some rest, while I was sitting in a NICU hallway waiting to find out if Owen needed emergency surgery. You're being irrational. You said that in 2020. Word for word. I have that voicemail too. He was quiet. I'm not doing this for the money, I said. I mean, I will use the money. I'll use every cent of it for Owen. But that's not why I'm doing it. I'm doing it because when they wrote that will, and called me emotionally unstable, when they told a life insurance company I abandoned them, they were lying. And I have the documentation to prove they were lying. And I want that to be part of the public record. You're doing this for revenge. I stood up. He stayed seated and looked up at me. No, I said. I'm doing it so that when Owen is old enough to understand, he knows the truth. Not their version. Not yours. The version with the receipts. I picked up my coffee cup. I'll have my lawyer contact yours. He left without saying anything else. That was February. Owen and I are in the middle of spring now. The spruce tree in the front yard is doing that thing it does every April where it looks like it's actually going to thrive this year. Owen has learned to ride his bike with one hand in the air, which terrifies me. And he has informed me that dinosaurs were warm-blooded and that anyone who says otherwise is wrong. He starts senior kindergarten in September. The probate case is ongoing. Rosamond filed the contest in March. Daniel's lawyer has pushed back on every point. The process is slow and expensive. And some days I sit at my kitchen table, after Owen goes to sleep, and look at the growing number on my legal invoice, and wonder if I'm making a terrible mistake. But then I think about the call log. I think about 42 calls, and 22 voicemails, and a text about getting rest while I was in a hospital hallway. I think about a will signed 9 months after their grandson's surgery calling me emotionally unstable. I think about a life insurance policy opened the month after Ryan's money came through. They spent 30 years believing that if you managed your finances carefully and kept your boundaries and never got pulled into other people's emergencies, you would be fine. They died on a highway in the Okanagan and left behind a house worth $800,000 and a document designed to erase me, and I am still here, with my son and my call logs and my lawyer and my spruce tree. I don't know yet what the court will decide. Maybe I'll win. Maybe I'll lose. Maybe Daniel and I will meet somewhere in the middle, and we'll both walk away unhappy, which might be the most honest outcome. I've spent just over $19,000 in legal fees so far. I think about that number sometimes. I think about what else 19,000 buys. But here's what I keep coming back to. In 2020, my parents had a choice. They chose the cruise. They chose the non-refundable deposit and the Alaska itinerary, and not to find out what happened to a grandchild who was being transferred for open-heart surgery. And then they spent the next 5 years building a paper trail designed to make sure I'd never be able to say they were wrong. I'm saying it, with documentation. Owen came into the kitchen last week, while I was on the phone with Rosamond going over some new filing. He waited very patiently until I was done. He does this now. Waits patiently. It's very alarming. And then he said, "Mom, are we getting money?" I put my phone down. "Maybe," I said. We might not." "Okay," he said. "Can we still get pizza on Friday?" "Yes, buddy. We can always get pizza on Friday." He seemed satisfied with that and went back to his dinosaurs. I watched him go and thought, this is why. Not the money. Not the principle, not even entirely the justice. It's this. The fact that Owen will one day be old enough to understand what happened, and I want to be able to look him in the eye and tell him I didn't walk away. That when someone tried to rewrite the story, I had every receipt, every log, every voicemail sitting in a folder on my hard drive. That I stood up and said this is what actually happened. That's worth something. I'm still figuring out exactly what. If any of this sounds familiar, if you've been the person making 40 calls that nobody answers, or the person who had to choose between following your child to a hospital and paying next month's rent, or the person who watched family rewrite history to make themselves the good guy, I want to hear from you. Leave a comment. Tell me what you would do. Tell me if you think fighting is worth what it costs. Tell me if you think there's a version of justice that doesn't eventually look a little like revenge. I'll read every one. I mean that. My name is Claire Mackenzie. I'm 31 years old, and I'm not done yet.